Okay. I don't have to, oops, that's already full, that's good. Don't have to go to Singapore anymore, all the Singaporeans are here. It's, it's great. Okay. These are the questions. This is it for tonight, is it? Yeah? Okay. Should be enough. Yeah. Not so many. Not so many. Adjust it?
Yeah, because it's a bit too soft.
Too soft? Okay. Okay. Okay, so here we are. Let's start, see what happens. See how we go. Okay, dearest Ajahn, what's a good start? I did not win the grand prize and heavenly trip, nor nor the second prize of jhana, neither the third prize of nimitta, but I did gain the consultation prizes of peace, unconditional love to myself, and studying at the moment. I'm contented. Okay, well done. That's really good. And this is, of course, one of the main teachings of Ajahn Brahm, right? Not to actually go for any goals, not to kind of be disappointed if you don't get this and get that, but just be happy whatever you get. And this is it's so true, because it's all about craving, right? If you want something all the time, you're always going to crave, and that craving itself is actually what stops you from becoming peaceful. So it's a wonderful thing that you think like that, and this is certainly Ajahn Brahm will be very proud of you if he heard that. So that's good. Great, well done. So one of the things about I always find by going on a meditation retreat or whatever it is always to remember that what matters is not so much what you get on a particular retreat. What matters is if you compare yourself to the retreat you went last year, and you compare the retreat you have this year, and next year you compare the retreat next year compared to what you did this year, and you see that there's some kind of progress, then you're doing the right thing, right? That's when it's working. That's what's important. And if you're not making progress, that's when you have to look at yourself and say, well, what can I improve in my life? Because it is the rest of our lives that basically decide how our meditation is going to work out, right? So if you live your life well, if you live your life in a good way, your meditation is going to improve year by year. If you don't understand, if you don't have enough insight into your defilements, don't have enough insight into your character, you don't know what you should be improving, then you're going to fail in making that progress. So this is what the main importance of insight, of understanding, and also insight meditation of vipassana is all about seeing your defilements. That's the most important thing, first of all. And once you understand your defilements, then you can actually move forward and you can do something about that. And this is one of the things the Buddha said. The Buddha said that the only thing that matters in life is that you are improving in good states and declining in the bad ones. If you're doing that, you're fine. So are you improving in good states? Well, this sounds like you're doing that. That's great. So the Buddha said that there's a nice sutta which I like to quote. It's in the Majjhima Nikaya, and the Buddha said in the sutta that if you're asked by your teacher to leave the monastery here, but you are doing well and you are improving in the good states. Improving in good states means you're increasing in mindfulness, right? Your samadhi is getting better. You're having more metta in your life. You feel more pure-hearted. You have less defilements, right? Less kind of anger, less greed, more peace in your mind. If all of these good things are improving and the bad things are going down, then if you're asked to leave, you should cling on. You should not stay, not leave. You should hold on to where you are. That's what he said. It's true. So one of the monks at Bodhinyana many years ago said that if he was asked to leave, he would chain himself to the front gate of the monastery. So he didn't have to leave. Anyway, so that's the Buddha's advice. It's quite interesting, isn't it? He said some remarkable things. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Ajahn, please advise whether the Heart Sutra and the Lotus Sutra is originated from the Buddha. Thank you. Okay, so these two sutras, the Heart Sutra is basically a contraction or is a summary of the Prajnaparamita Sutra, which is one of the most important sutras of Mahayana Buddhism. And the Heart Sutra is like the core, the essence of that Prajnaparamita Sutra. So it's very much part of Mahayana Buddhism. And Mahayana Buddhism started to rise maybe 200 or 300 years after the Buddha's time. That's when it started to come into existence. And some of the early Prajnaparamita Sutra, some of it is actually quite orthodox, and it's almost like Theravadan in many ways, very kind of early Buddhist in the feel about these sutras. So some of it can be okay, but you get the feeling straight away that when you read these sutras, you get this feeling that you're reading a different type of literature. Oops, somebody. You're reading a different type of literature. You're reading something which is very different from the early sutras. It's very kind of, it's very elaborate. It talks about, the Buddha and all these bodhisattvas, thousands of Buddhas, and it's very kind of miraculous. It's a very different feel from the early sutras. So straight away, you get the feeling that you have moved away from the early Buddhism. So that is the Heart Sutra. The Lotus Sutra is a very different beast. I haven't actually read any of these sutras. I've read only pieces of them, to be honest with you. The Lotus Sutra is a very much later thing. It's about maybe 1,000 years after the Buddha, or 800 years after the Buddha. And that is a much more kind of going its new ways, so to speak. And it's much more of a Mahayana Sutra than the Heart Sutra, and has gone much further away from the early teachings. So no, they didn't originate from the Buddha, but in a sense everything comes from the Buddha, right? The Buddha started it out, and after the Buddha started it out, it developed in different directions. And that's why we have all the Buddhism that we have today. All the Buddhism that we have today obviously came from the Buddha originally. Then it went different ways, and it kind of took off in various ways. So sometimes it's quite hard if you want to know whether something is accurate, whether something actually is the word of the Buddha or not, can be quite difficult because you actually have to be able to compare the later sutras with the earlier ones and to actually be able to decide whether there has been a change, whether there has been a kind of new movement or new development can be quite difficult if you don't have a trained eye to see these things. And so because it is quite hard, I always recommend people to just stay with the early sutras. There's so much material in the early sutras. There's so much there. So read that. And even if you read that, you're a rare person in the world, right? The vast majority of Buddhists never read a single sutta in their entire lives. So if you read one sutta, wow, you're doing really, really well. So read at least one sutta, like the Metta Sutta. The Metta Sutta is a good one, right? That's an excellent one. And I think many of you will find it inspiring because when you read the word of the Buddha, one of the things about the word of the Buddha, when you read that, it's like you are in the presence of the Buddha, right? You know that this is the Buddha. The Buddha is right there in front of you. It's very inspiring. One of the things I always like to think about is that when the Buddha taught these sutras 2,500 years ago, he taught them in such a way that he knew that there was going to be people hundreds, maybe thousands of years afterwards that would be listening to these sutras, right? He knew that because he was talking about the wheel of the Dhamma rolling out in the world. And the idea of the wheel of the Dhamma rolling out in the world is precisely the idea that this will last a long time until that Dhamma wheel stops. So he knew that. So in a way, the Buddha knew that we would be sitting here today, right? We would be going on this retreat, or we would be reading the sutras. And he took that into account when he taught those sutras. And that's why the sutras of the Buddha have this timeless feel to them. They're talking about psychology. They're talking about the human condition in such a way that it's equally valid today as it was 2,500 years ago. It's equally valid for any culture, right? Because the human condition of the heart is the same wherever you go in the world. It doesn't matter. It's independent of culture, independent of all the superficial things. It goes to the core of what it means to be human. So please, I would really recommend you, if you have a chance, read a bit of sutras, and if you find it difficult, you will find some good explanations of the sutras available on the internet by people such as me. No, I'm being, there's lots of good ones. I'm being a bit, not very modest there, but there are lots of good people on the internet, people like Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi and Ajahn Brahm, of course, and Ajahn Sujato, and many others are very, very good at explaining these things. So, there you are. Okay, next one. What time do you want to stop tonight? Do you have any kind of clear limit? No limit? Okay. This is the last day, right? So you can, okay. Okay.
We can go through it while you sit down class tonight.
What is the course tonight? Okay. Okay. Dear Ajahn, Sutta always mention that one understands anicca, dukkha, and anatta. One will be enlightened. Please help us to understand how we can understand anicca, dukkha, anatta correctly to attain enlightenment. Okay, it is not enough to read the sutta, right? You have to go deeper than that. That's the first thing here. So, and this is one of the things about the Buddha's teachings. There is like a stage of intellectual understanding where you start reading the suttas and you get a feel for what these things are. But of course, really understanding these teachings is a matter of having direct insight and direct understanding for yourself. And the only way you're going to have that is through the still mind. It doesn't come through intellectual knowledge. Intellectual knowledge is the thinking mind. And this is why the still mind is so powerful, because it takes you beyond the thinking way and to direct seeing of these particular things. So what you do, and this is very well explained in the Anapanasati Sutta. The sutta, the Buddha, the Anapanasati is the mindfulness of breathing. In the sutta, the Buddha starts off, it's a sutta of 12 steps, and 12 steps of how to do mindfulness of breathing. And 16 steps. You should have corrected me, if you know your suttas. 16 steps for mindfulness of breathing. And the first 12 of those are all about how to calm the mind. So you learn how to calm the mind, right? It starts with watching the long breath, the short breath, and it goes all the way to vimochayang chittang. Vimochayang chittang means to liberate the mind. That is a reference to the jhanas. So it goes all the way from starting watching the breath all the way to the jhanas. Now the last 4 stages, these are the insight stages in Buddhism. So you can see here, this sutta, it lays it out very clearly that there isn't really any insight until after the jhanas, when they become really, at least very powerful. Before that, it's just insight to help you move forward. At this point is the real insight into the anicca, dukkha, and anatta. And that what it says that then you breathe and you reflect on these things. And what you reflect on, the most obvious thing to reflect on after you have attained a deep state of samadhi, is the process you have been through, right? You've just been through this process, starting at the very beginning, watching the in-breath, the out-breath, going all the way up to the jhanas. And in that process, there's lots of things disappearing. And that thing disappearing, that's anicca, right? When something disappears, when you find that your body starts to fade away, right? This is what you find in meditation. When you become a little bit peaceful, the body becomes less important. It starts to fade away. Gradually, the defilements in the mind start to fade away. This is called viraga. This is one of the things that is, you're supposed to contemplate, the fading away of things. And then eventually, as you go deeper, sometimes the body disappears altogether. That's nirodha. So you contemplate anicca, impermanence, the change, then the fading away, and then the nirodha of these things. And you can see this. And there's so many, what are the things that actually are disappearing? Well, first of all, there is the body. It happens to the body. It happens to the defilements, right? It happens to the thinking mind. The thinking mind becomes more peaceful, more calm. It happens to the will. You stop willing so much as you did before. It happens to the feelings. All the bad feelings start to disappear, and all you have left is good feelings. Then the good feelings start to change. They become more powerful, right? So all of these things are changing, and all of this is a potential for insight throughout the whole process. So what you do your meditation on your samatha meditation, you become nice and peaceful. And once you have done that, afterwards, that's when you just sit back and you kind of reflect on what's happened. And that's when you see anicca, viraga, nirodha. And the last one is patinissagga. Patinissagga is abandoning things. And this is the highest kind of understanding of impermanence. Once you understand impermanence so profoundly that you understand that this is not worth holding on to anymore, then craving disappears. And patinissagga is craving disappearing. You don't crave for these things anymore. You don't want them, right? You see, this is yucky stuff. This is terrible. This is what dukkha means. Dukkha means this is not nice. When you see something is dukkha, you let go. You don't crave anymore. That's what it's all about, right? So when you go through your meditation practice and you start to get these beautiful feelings inside, and you start to realize that one of the reasons why you have those beautiful feelings is because the body is disappearing. The body is bad, right? The body is no good. And then you get this kind of slight aversion to the body because the body creates so much pain and suffering in life. And then you abandon the craving for the body. Out the window. This is kind of the gradual process happening here. So the best thing to do is always be very practical about these things. It's very easy to be theoretical, but be practical. So you contemplate these things on your own experience, particularly when you become very peaceful. But wait till you become very peaceful. In the meantime, before you get any real state of samadhi, the most important insights you can have, and this is from the Satipatthana Sutta, the most important insights are to understand the defilements of your own mind. This is the most important thing here. Because by understanding your own defilements, you have a chance to overcome them, right? If you don't understand them, you can't overcome them. You have to know what you're dealing with. So once you gradually understand these things, gradually abandon them, the peace becomes more and more profound. And then eventually you get to the point where you can actually get into a state of samadhi, and then afterwards you can reflect like this. Okay. So that is it's a very big subject, impermanent suffering in non-self. But yeah, anyway. Okay. Dear Ajahn, do we need a lot of good karma to see the nimittas and reaching jhana? It's not. It depends on what you mean by good karma. If you mean a lot of good karma from a past life, the answer is no. You don't need lots of good karma from a past life. If you have been reborn as a human in this life, and all of you have, right? Any non-human? See, all of you are humans, so that's good. So that means good enough, right? You're here. That's all you need from the past. But of course, in this life, sometimes what you have to do is that if meditation doesn't work, there's a reason for that. And there's too many defilements in the mind. There isn't enough happiness there. And to create that happiness in the mind, which kind of takes you into samadhi, into the nimittas and these kind of things, karma is really what takes you into those things. So look at your life, your ordinary life. What can you do to improve your life? What can you do to be more kind? What can you do to have a more pure heart? What can you do to be more generous, right? What can you do to have less anger in daily life or whatever it is? And all of these things will support your practice in meditation. So this is actually very important. And if you feel that you're not making enough progress, this is usually the reason why the progress isn't happening. So certainly look at that. And that's part of the idea of good karma, right? And it'll come back next year. And one of the most beautiful similes of the Buddha, one of the ones that I really, really like, and I teach at every retreat that I teach, is a simile of the mountain. And this simile is where the Buddha says that if somebody is a very good person, they have a very good heart, they have good speech, good actions, everything is good with them, and when they go back in the evening to their house, they finish the day's work, and they go back to their home or whatever, then when they sit down and lie down, they feel happiness. It's automatic. And he says it's just like if you imagine a house and there's a big mountain behind the house, right? And when the sun sets behind the mountain, then the house falls into the shade of that mountain. And the shade envelops, it kind of completely immerses that house in the shade. In the same way, if you're a good person, if you have a good heart, you're completely immersed and completely enveloped in the goodness of your character. So whenever you lie down, you feel, wow, you feel happy, right? Because you know you lived a good life. You feel good about yourself. And what a wonderful thing that is if we can do that. So this is the ideal thing, because what that means is that when you go on a meditation retreat like this, that's when you cash in your gambling chips, right? You come here, gambling here means doing good deeds. It's very kind of wholesome gambling. So you do the good deeds and you just sit back, and you don't have to do anything because you just feel happy here. And because you feel happy, meditation is automatic. This is what Ajahn Brahm means. Sometimes people say, but Ajahn, how do you do it? He said, you just sit there and it just happens. This is Ajahn Brahm's teaching, right? And that sitting there and it just happening only works because of this kind of simile, because you feel good about yourself. You have a good heart. So the process happens by itself. It's natural. That's how it works. I find that such a powerful and beautiful simile, the idea of being completely immersed in your own good actions, right? You've done so much goodness. You can't escape the happiness that follows. Isn't that a good idea? Sounds like a nice idea to me. So you feel good. Anyway, so there you are. Okay, hello Ajahn. Please thank everyone for me. Okay, thank you everyone for complimenting the food. Okay. However, the meals coming out of the kitchen is a team effort. Thanks to all the yogis on kitchen duties. Okay. Special thank you to Vincent and Patsy for their selfless services. Without them, the little extras would not have been possible. Much metta from Michelle. I don't know who Michelle is, but anyway, that's very, very kind of you. Cook, of course, the cook. Okay. Okay. Very good. Huh? Well done. Okay, that's good. Huh? That's the way to make good karma. So next time you have a better retreat. Okay. Dear Ajahn, when people die, they get jhana. Why are there wandering spirits, lost souls? Okay. The idea that people get jhana when they die is it's not necessarily the case that they get jhana. This happens to maybe a very, very small and tiny minority of people that they get jhana when they die. The majority of people, and according to the suttas, they will tend to go to a bad destination when they die rather than to a good one. Of course, on a retreat like this, there's a large number of very good people, so it's a different situation. And that's the wonderful thing about being in good company with nice people, because everybody's kind of helping each other, moving each other towards a good rebirth, right, rather than a bad one, at the very least, unless you make it even further. But the majority of people do not attain jhana when they die, and the majority of people either stay as human beings, probably, and then a lot of people will also go down to a worse, even worse rebirth than a human rebirth. And sometimes when you look at the news on TV, you can see why that is the case, right? Because people do all kind of crazy things in the world. So, so that is basically what happens. To get jhana when you die, really the only way most likely whether that's going to happen is that if you get jhana during this life. So the Buddha says, if you want to be absolutely sure of dying and going into a jhana realm afterwards, the only way to be sure of that is if you have kind of stabilized your jhana practice in this life. If you have a stable jhana practice in this life, in other words, you know how to get into jhana, you know how to get out, you know how to stay there, all these kind of things, then when you die, you can kind of go to the nimitta and you can merge with the nimitta and you can enter a jhana state. That is really the only sure way. Everything else is uncertain and doubtful. So, Okay. Okay, as the retreat is coming to an end, I am afraid to lose the calm and peace here already. This way, what to do at work on Monday? Are you going back to work on Monday? Okay. Gee, okay, that's going to be interesting. Yeah. Any suggestions how to keep this calm and peace when you go home? Thank you, Ajahn. Okay, you're not going to be able to do it. That's the first thing. Yeah. Sorry about that. No, the most important thing, what you can learn letting go, right? Understanding you can't keep hold of these things. If you try to keep hold on to this when you go back home, you're going to suffer. And you're going to have a hard time because you feel, oh no, I'm losing it. And then when you suffer and when you feel you're losing what you had, you will get upset and you will get angry and then you will start doing stupid things, right? And this is what happens. So don't hold on to it. Just see what happens. And just try to be kind to the people around you. See if that peace you have enables you to be more kind and compassionate to the people around you. If it does at least that, that's already very powerful. Then you are improving your virtue, you're improving your own heart, and by doing that, you are moving in the right direction for the future. So try not to hold on to these things. So always remember, this is a long kind of process, right? And hopefully one of the things that you will notice when you go back, try to maybe notice how people, what it is that make you react to other people. What is it that makes you upset when somebody says something or does something? What's going on there? And once you understand why something upsets you, why something kind of irritates you, why something is difficult, then you can actually do something about that. So this is one of the advantages of being peaceful, is that you have the ability to see more deeply inside of yourself. You can understand some of your habits, right? Some of the bad habits, some of the things that you have accumulated over such a long time. And when you see that, when you understand those things, then you can ask yourself, how can I change my perception to look at the situation in a different way so it doesn't give rise to upset and anger in the future? This is one of the ways you can use the calm and the peace you have in the wise way. So don't try to hold on to it, rather use it to learn something about yourself. One of the difficult things about overcoming one's defilements is that they are so incredibly habitual, right? It's very strong. And very often you can see that with your family members, right? The family members are the people closest to us. And because they are the closest to us, they're also the ones that can very easily upset us. And sometimes a family member, if they say that thing, there's one thing they always say that always upsets us. And the reason is because this has been ingrained in us over such a long period of time that it's very hard to let go of those things. So this is one of the reasons why letting go of defilements is so hard, and why it's useful to have insight into the defilements. One of the things you should always have is that if you do find that you get upset about something, don't get upset about yourself for getting upset, right? Don't think that you have to be a good Buddhist, and if you're not a good Buddhist, if you get upset, then you have failed. And then you get angry with the anger, and that just makes things worse. So have compassion for yourself. Understand that the reason why you have these reactions is because it's so ingrained. It's been ingrained not only in this lifetime, but probably also in previous lifetimes. So you are a victim in a sense. You are a victim of actions that you don't even know about, that happened in lives a long time ago. And when you understand that you are, in a sense, a victim of what you did in a past life, things you can't even remember, then you can have a sense of compassion for yourself. And when you have a sense of compassion, at the very least, you don't get upset with your own reactions to what other people do. That's very useful, right? I sometimes think like that to myself. I think, oh, why am I being upset for this stupid thing here? Then I have compassion for myself, and then the upset disappears straight away. Very, very handy here. Okay, so I'm sorry about that. I can't really help you to hold on to the piece, but hopefully you can use it anyway. Okay, dear Ajahn, I was at this state of stillness and peace, 2 hours sitting. Okay, excellent. But I can't let go of the hearing sense. I was peaceful, not agitated with the sounds, and my nimittas, question mark, keep changing colors and shapes. If I lose the previous one, what should one do here? Okay, well, I think always the idea of of this meditation, the way Ajahn Brahm teaches, and this is also really the way it works in the sutras as well, is not, you don't really need to do very much. In fact, the more you think that you have to do something, the more likely you are to mess up the process. So in this particular case, if everything is going well, the hearing sense is still there, don't do anything at all. Just stay with it. Just allow it to be here and see what happens. The reason why the hearing sense is still there is because the hearing sense is usually the last one to disappear, right? Very often it is. And because of that, it still lingers around. So you just need to go deeper. You need to just allow things to become peaceful and more happy or whatever, and then it will eventually disappear. So, one of the things that you always see in the sutras, the way the Buddha always teaches meditation practice, it always starts off with bringing happiness and joy to the mind. So very often meditation begins with you do your recollection of your generosity, your recollection of your virtue, or recollection of the Buddha that we did before. You do these kind of things to give kind of a joy in a meditation practice. So sometimes if you have an ability to get joy, if there are things that brings joy to your mind, at this particular stage, sometimes all you have to do is just to change your perception a little bit, look in a different place, and when you look at that place which gives rise to joy, that joy will actually take you deeper into the meditation practice. Just remind yourself of something beautiful and see if the joy arises and see if that helps out. But if you are at this stage, then very often that might be disturbing. It's very hard to tell exactly where you're at this stage. But sometimes you have to experiment a little bit and see what actually works for you and what doesn't work. But happiness is the thing which takes you into samadhi, right? So you have to find that happiness, not just peace, but you have to have happiness as part of the path into samadhi. Okay, dear Ajahn, meditation is very hard. Should one keep trying, knowing one may never get jhanas. What simple advice can you give us as we leave this place? Okay, well, again, it's not about getting jhanas, right? This is not what the Buddhist path is about. Remember what the path is about. This is what I said at the very beginning. The path is about improving here, right? The path is about heading in the right direction here. If you are improving, if your meditation is becoming more peaceful, if the good states are going up, the bad states are going down, then you are doing what is worthwhile. And you will already see the results, right? If the bad states go down a little bit, you already feel better about yourself. If the good states go up, you feel better about yourself. That is what matters. So please don't worry about the jhanas. It doesn't matter if you get the jhanas, it's completely irrelevant. All that matters is that you are improving in your practice. That matters. If you're not improving, then you need to have a look at what's going on and try to change maybe, or try to look, to sort things out. So that is all I would recommend you to do. So as you leave this retreat, reflect on your life. Reflect on whether you have improved at all. And if you haven't improved, what can you change in your life? What can you do to be more kind? What can you do to be, to do all the right things in your life? When you go back home, you can kind of make a resolution now. I'm going to try better to do this better or do that better. And then gradually you can kind of, hopefully change things around. That is really the clue to deepening your meditation practice. Okay. I find that some sections of the suttas are quite open to interpretation, e.g. calming the bodily formations can be interpreted in many different ways. What are your views on this? Yes, there is. It's true that there are different types of interpretations possible of some of the passages in the suttas. And this is why it is very helpful to read the suttas quite broadly. And the more broad kind of understanding you have of the path, the better ability you have to judge whether something is a good interpretation or a bad interpretation. And this idea of calming the bodily formation, I think not that one, I think it's the one before that that's even more open to interpretation. The one before that is about experiencing the whole body. Sabba kaya patisangvedi is the Pali word, which literally means experiencing the whole body. And the question then is, what does it mean by body in that context? And some people say body then means the physical body, right? Whereas if you go to the commentary says that it means the breath body. Because the word body in Pali, just like the word body in English, can mean any kind of conglomeration of many different things. So the breath is a body in the sense that there's many different types of breaths that all together form the body of the breath. And when I read that sutta, I understand it to mean the breath body, because just after that, the Buddha says that the breath is considered a body here because it's one among the bodies, right? It specifically says that about the breath. So because of that, my understanding there is that it means the breath. But other people interpret it as meaning the physical body here. But remember, what matters here, the interpretation here may not be that crucial. What matters is whether your meditation is becoming deeper, right? That's what's really important. And if you are able to deepen your meditation with using the physical body, calming the physical body, that's fine. And if you prefer to just stick with the breath and experiencing the whole breath, which to me makes more sense because this is the Anapanasati Sutta, is a sutta on breath meditation, not on body meditation. If you want to stay with the breath, that's fine as well. But remember what matters, and this is what comes down to all the time, is whether you are improving in the good states and whether you are declining in the bad states, right? That is what's important. So whether you follow the interpretation of it being the breath or you follow the interpretation of it being the body, doesn't matter as long as you're heading in the right way. Ajahn Brahm interprets it to mean the breath, and to me that is the one that makes the most sense. I think the Goenka tradition is the one that interprets it to mean the whole body, but I don't really agree with that. Calming the bodily formation, this is the one that comes after that, and this is the Pasambayang Kaya Sankarang, I think. And Kaya Sankara there is means the means the breath because it actually is defined as the breath elsewhere in the sutras. I think it's fairly clear that that means the breath. I don't think there's that much difference of interpretation about that. So the calming of the bodily formation actually does mean that. So yeah. But it is true, though. It is one of the things about the sutras is that it is possible to read different passages in different ways. And one of the problems is that you go to different teachers, they will often tell you that different interpretations. Then you will be uncertain, right? You will say, oh, which one is right? Which one is wrong? Yeah. So what you have to do then, there's two things you can do. One is to continue reading the sutras for yourself, so you get a broader view of what's in the sutras. And the broader your understanding, the more you will feel independent of other people, and you will be able to interpret the sutras in your own way. And the second thing, you just listen to different teachers, and then you read the sutras. And very often, you will be able to get a feeling for what is right by reading the sutras and comparing it to what other people say. It isn't that difficult. Okay, I have to admit I've been doing this for 20 years full time, so maybe I have an advantage of you, but I think it's doable with a little bit of effort. And the third thing to do is remember that how do you decide what teacher to follow? What is the right person to follow in matters of interpretation? And as always, when you decide on a teacher in this world, you should always look at their conduct, right? What are they like as a person? And if somebody has the qualities of Dhamma in their heart, if somebody has the qualities of metta, of kindness, of wisdom, if they are good people, if they're compassionate and kind and all these things, that is the sort of person that you should place any confidence in. So that's the other thing. The Buddha says this all the time. The Buddha actually says, this is in the Vimamsika Sutta and the Majjhima Nikaya, he says that, you should investigate me, he says, right? He also says, I'm fully enlightened, but he also said you should investigate me. If you have any doubts, you should look. And if you see anything, you should, it doesn't say if you see anything bad, but he says that you should investigate. And then you will understand that there are only good qualities there. And that, of course, we should also do that. We should also investigate. We should look at people. And when we see that the good qualities are there, then there is a basis for having confidence in that person. But if we see kind of things which are a little bit shaky, a little bit dodgy, well then at the very least we should have doubts, right? We should wonder, well, is this person pure or are they perhaps not pure? There is at least ground for doubt. You don't have to reject them outright, but at least you can feel a little bit more uncertain. And we shouldn't be afraid of that, because this is part of the way the Buddha taught, that we need to make these kind of distinctions. If we don't do that, we're not going to get anywhere, because we kind of, this crazy wisdom, maybe he's a crazy wisdom person. Maybe just completely, it looked like they're completely nuts, but maybe they have some wisdom under the surface there somewhere. If you think like that, you're never going to be able to, to get anywhere. So trust your own judgment. Because usually, if you are a reasonably upright person who is reasonably bright, reasonably intelligent, you will be able to make these kind of judgments for yourself. Okay. Okay, dear Ajahn, what is the gradual path? Okay. So the gradual path, this is the kind of the main exposition by the Buddha in the suttas on how to practice and how to train. And this is a very beautiful teaching. And often when I teach retreats on the suttas, I use this teaching as the backbone for the entire sutta retreat, because it shows you how to practice the path from the very beginning to the very end. And it gives you beautiful instructions on the way on how to do this. And the gradual training is like the backbone. And once you have that backbone in place, you can take suttas from here, from there, and kind of put it into the gradual training and expand the gradual training into the whole Tipitaka. So that's kind of, there's a lot of material there to put into that gradual training here. So the gradual path is what shows you how awakening, how enlightenment comes about, right? That's basically what it is. It shows you how you start off. And it always starts off with kind of hearing the teachings of the Buddha. And in the suttas, it also often starts off by becoming a monk or a nun. And the reason for that is because it goes all the way to awakening. And to reach full awakening, normally you have to become a monastic somewhere on the path. And it starts with that. So you hear the Dhamma, right? You listen to the Buddha's teaching, you think, wow, there's something powerful here. There's something beautiful. And then you gain a sense of confidence. And then from that confidence, you start to practice. I think many of us have probably been Buddhist in previous lives. I'm sure I have been a Buddhist in a previous life. Otherwise, I cannot explain how I ended up as a Buddhist monk. So, and so that helps, right? That kind of guides in the right direction. But then when you start to read these things, your confidence improves and becomes more powerful. Then you start to practice, you get results, right? And this is one of the things for me, is one of the things that keeps me on the path, is the fact that you get results, right? Things happen. You change over time. You become more pure. It actually works. If it didn't work, I'd be out of here in no time. There's no point. There's no point in being a monk, and if it doesn't work. And you can go out in the world and have a bit of fun if it doesn't work. But the point is that it does work, and that's what gives you the sense of confidence. And you read the suttas and you think there's something very powerful and beautiful about this teaching, something very, very kind of inspiring. This is the meaning of life. This is the feeling I get when I read the suttas. This is the meaning of life. This is what it's all about. So why should I not be a monk? This is precisely what I should be doing with my life. This took me a while to understand that, but I realized after a while that the Buddha's teachings actually, these teachings are the answer to the meaning of life. The meaning of life, what is the meaning of life? The meaning of life is, if you look into your heart, what is it that you want? Right? What is that you really want? And we all have these desires, we have all these things, we feel unfulfilled in a certain way. That's why you have a desire, because you don't feel fulfilled. So how do you get that fulfillment? Well, one of the ways is by practicing the Buddhist path. And one day you start to feel complete, you feel fulfilled. The craving starts to disappear, right? All those desires, all those things that you always wanted to have before, you don't want them anymore, you don't need it, because you feel complete for the first time in your life. And this is what this samadhi is about. And that is why somebody who has samadhi is very content and a very happy person, because they don't have that hole inside of you, that itch which is always there, is gone. Wow, how beautiful that is, right? This is how you start to move in the right direction. And then, of course, you have to go beyond that, because that is not a permanent state either. And then you go into the really deep Buddhist ideas of understanding reality as it actually is, and then you can let go of the whole lot. So that's the gradual training. It's a very, very beautiful thing. If you want to read the gradual training, one sutta, if you know your suttas a little bit, and if you go to the Majjhima Nikaya, the middle-length sayings of the Buddha, and you read Majjhima Nikaya number 27, it's called the Shorter Sutta on the Elephant's Footprint, the Chula Hatti Padupama Sutta in the Pali language. It's a beautiful exposition of the gradual training here. Majjhima Nikaya 27. Okay. What are the characteristics of our Buddhist tradition? Why is it said that it is closer to the original teaching? Okay. I presume by our tradition you mean the Theravada tradition, presumably. And the answer is that the Theravada tradition is very broad. There's so much different things within the Theravada tradition. Some of the Theravada is quite close to the early teachings. Some is not, right? It depends which teacher you go to. It depends which country you go to. And you will find that many of the Theravada teachers, or many of the people who teach meditation within this tradition, very often they use teachings that are not actually the word of the Buddha, which are later elaborations like the Abhidhamma, like the Visuddhimagga, like all these commentaries, all these kind of things. Very often that is actually what Theravada is. And the early suttas are often forgotten, also in the Theravada tradition. So, and this is one of the beautiful things about, maybe one of the things that happened also with the kind of the Western influence, because when the Western influence, became part of kind of the Buddhist tradition, what happened was that Westerners looked at the suttas in a new way, because we were outsiders. We weren't part of an existing tradition. When a tradition has existed for many hundreds of years, we tend to kind of get stale and you get ossified and look at things in a certain way, because this is the way it has always been done. But as an outsider, you look at things with fresh eyes, right? And this is the advantage of being a Western monk who comes from the outside. And you can actually look at this with fresh eyes and you can say, well, wait a minute, what actually is the teachings of the Buddha here and what is not? And this is, and of course, once you kind of open up that avenue, then many other people catch on as well. They say, wait, yeah, you have a point there. What is actually the Abhidhamma really the word of the Buddha? And I know that in many Theravada countries now, that view is slowly changing. People are starting to accept that the Abhidhamma is not really the word of the Buddha. At least there is discussion about these things. I know Ajahn Brahm, he sometimes goes to places, he travels a lot obviously, he goes to monasteries around the world, in Sri Lanka and everywhere, and sometimes he says that, Abhidhamma is not the word of the Buddha. And they say, what? You can't say, you can't say that. But it's important to say these things because we have to be honest about these things. If we're not honest, we're not going to make progress and not going to get to the real teachings. So I think it is fairly well established these days that the closest you can pretty much get to the teachings of the Buddha are the 4 Nikayas, the Pali Nikayas, the Digha Nikaya, the Majjhima Nikaya, the Samyutta Nikaya, and the Anguttara Nikaya. This is the closest you can get. These are available in English translation. There's also the Chinese Agamas. I don't know if any of you read Chinese. They're apparently very hard to read, even if you read Chinese, because it's an ancient kind of Chinese, 1,500 years old. But it's quite interesting to read the Chinese Agamas because what you find, which is so fascinating, is that the suttas that are kept there are very, very similar to the Pali Suttas. There are some translations now available of the Chinese Agamas into English, and I have read them and I have compared them to the Pali Suttas, and it's very amazing how similar it actually is. That gives you very strong confidence that we have the word of the Buddha. So it's very clear what the word of the Buddha is. So stick to that, and then you'll be fine. There was Ajahn Sujato and myself. We wrote a small book recently called The Authenticity of the Early Buddhist Suttas, or the Early Buddhist Discourses. That was published by something called the Oxford Center for Buddhist Studies, a very kind of prestigious place, and they liked it, so they published it. And that is basically arguing that we know what the early Buddhist suttas are, and we can distinguish them from what is later, and also we can know with a fair amount of certainty that it goes back to the Buddha. That is the argument in that one. It's a bit technical and a bit kind of academic, but if you are interested in that sort of thing, you can Google on the authenticity of the early Buddhist texts, and you will probably should be able to find that our writing fairly easily. Okay. Dear Ajahns, in the suttas on the different planes of existence, there are very detailed descriptions of physical hell and beings that managed the hell, I think it says it, managed the hell. However, it is also mentioned by Ajahn Brahm that hell is mind-made, particularly in this particular sutta, somehow added, or did it originate from the Buddha? How do we tell the Buddha's teaching in the suttas versus not the real ones? Thank you. Well, the thing is that just because there are other beings there doesn't mean that this is not mind-made, right? There might be a kind of a manager in hell who kind of stokes the fires and that kind of things. I don't know, possibly. But the point is that these beings as well can be mind-made, right? We create also the beings around us. It's like the heavenly realms, right? When there's one heavenly realm where Sakka is there, and he has this big palace and all these nymphs around there. This female nymphs, and are they real? Are they mind-made? Is it a heaven for them if they are there? And these are good questions, and very often these are mind-made because you produce them through your karma when you go into that existence. And I think the same thing is often true for hell. So you have this perception perhaps that somebody's judging you, and somebody's in charge, somebody's managing this hell realm, but it's just your perception, and you go there and you feel judged, and because you feel judged, then you send yourself down to these kind of realms. So it can be tricky sometimes. It can be hard to know exactly how to interpret these things. So don't be too quick in interpreting what's going on there. But this is one of the things, and this is one of the kind of the frightening things about karma, is that you send yourself to these realms, right? This is one of the very well-known things that happens to people when they are close to death very often. They have a review of their past life, or of this life, and they remember this life, and they kind of add up all the actions. And then you get a feeling about yourself. You get a feeling for whether you have been a good person or a bad person. You summarize your whole life, And then you make a judgment, and you can't really avoid that making that judgment because you see everything in front of you. And when you see everything in front of you, that making the judgment is natural. It happens by itself, unless you are an Arya, perhaps, or a noble person or something. So that is why it is so important to accumulate goodness in this life. So when you have a good heart, when you die, and you have accumulated good things, when you look at your life, you think, yeah, it's a good life. Then you feel satisfied, you feel content, and you judge yourself in a good way, and you send yourself off to a good destination. That's what matters. So yeah, often these things are mind-made. And one of the things about this particular sutta that you're referring to here, this is a sutta which occurs in a couple of places, and the manager of hell is called Yama, right? Yama is the god who manages hell. And one of the things that you will see in that sutta is that Yama doesn't actually judge you. Yama says, "Oh, my good man, did you do good acts or bad acts?" "Oh, I did, I did a bit of both. I did a bit of, okay, so, shouldn't you have known better? Oh, I guess I should have known better." So actually, Yama doesn't really say anything. He doesn't actually say you are bad or you are good or judges you. He just asks questions, and then you do the judging yourself, right? So that sutta sort of shows you how the process happens. So Yama is almost like your conscience. It's like the back of your mind, which comes out and says, have you been a good person? Just like your conscience in this life. Okay. Wow, this is terrible. There's so many questions to go. Okay, I'm going to go a bit faster, I think. Dear Ajahn, how do you forgive and forget when somebody does something terrible to you, e.g. total betrayal? The thought of what the person has done to you keeps coming up constantly on a daily basis. How do I forgive, not think about it, when the thought comes up automatically even after a few years have gone by here? Continued, okay. It's easier said than done when people say, let it go and not think about it. Please help. Yeah, so this is the thing. Letting go is not something that you can just do, right? Letting go happens because you're thinking in the right way. That's why it happens. And this is one of the tricks in the suttas. The Buddha says that letting go happens when you understand that something is suffering here. That's when letting go happens. It's like when you, by accident, you put your hand on something very hot. You don't have to think, oh, should I move my hand or should I not move my hand? It happens straight away, right? It's an automatic reaction. And this is exactly the same thing with dukkha. When you really understand dukkha, you withdraw your mind just pulls away here. And that's how letting go happens. But very often with these kind of situations, what you have to do is you have to help yourself. And you have to learn to perceive what is going on in a different way here. And remember that if somebody has betrayed you, then it is really their problem and not so much your problem, right? If somebody betrays somebody else, they are the ones who have done something really bad. You haven't done anything bad. They have done something bad. So first of all, what you learn is that this is the way. They are the ones who are going to suffer the consequences of that. They are the ones who are going to have to, come in front of Yama and say, "Oh, did you do the right thing? Oh, not so sure. Not so sure." And so they are the ones who are going to suffer the consequences of that. So, instead of actually being upset with them, understand that they are going to suffer far, 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 far more than you are ever going to suffer because of that betrayal, right? And then you can turn it around and you can understand that they have acted against their own self-interest. If somebody acts against their own self-interest, what does that mean? It means that they are deluded. It means they are stupid. It means they don't understand what's going on. If somebody is deluded and stupid, what can you feel except for compassion? Right? They are foolish. They're acting against their own self-interest. They're creating suffering for themselves in the future. How can you not have compassion for somebody like that? So turn it around. Instead of thinking about yourself and thinking about the hurt that you have, think about what they have done and the kind of hurt that they will experience in the future as a consequence of that. They are actually harming themselves much more than they're harming you. So they are just acting in a foolish, very, very foolish way. The second thing to remember is that very often why people do this kind of things is because it's habitual, right? They have betrayed people in the past. They don't know how to do the right thing. They don't know how to act in the right way. And this habit is so powerful, they can't actually let it go. if they have been perhaps unfaithful to you or whatever, then probably this is kind of a very strong inclination they've had from the past. And they're carrying it with them into this life, and they can't let go of that. And they just have to keep on doing it and doing it again and again and again, never really learning here. And remember, look at yourself, look at your own mind, look at how hard it is to change yourself. Look at how hard it is to change your habits, to look at things in a new way, and not to get angry, with your kids when they do the wrong thing. It's hard, right? Very difficult not to get upset sometimes. So understand your own habits. When you understand how hard it is to change yourself, then you also understand how hard it is for other people to change, and then you don't judge them so harshly. So remember this: they are actually caught by their own past. They're caught by their own habits. They're caught by the things they have done previously in this life. They are caught by what they did in the past lives. And they're acting in this way, not because they want to, but because they are trapped into certain habit patterns. And then they create tremendous suffering for themselves. So try to think like this. And then you start to change your whole perception of the situation. Don't worry about your own hurt so much. Look at the hurt of the other person. Then the last thing that you should remember, and this of course is a very important lesson for all of us, is just to know that this is the way the world is. People betray each other, right? People do bad things to each other. This is unavoidable. This is going to happen. And it's going to happen again in the future unless you do something about it now, unless you practice in the right way. So it's not something that is wrong. It happened to me. It should not happen to me. This is life. Life is like this. Sometimes we lose our job. Sometimes our relationships break up. Sometimes our kids do all the wrong things. They don't get straight A's in school or whatever. And so all of these things this is just part of life. So remember, it's part of life. And when you understand that this is the reality, it's the way it has to be like this, how can you get upset with reality? How can you get upset with the way things have to be? You can't, right? This is the way it is. And then you make peace with it and you allow it to be the way it is. So the trick here is all about perception. It's all about thinking in the right way. If you think in the right way, then letting go is quite easy and quite automatic. So think in the right way, and then gradually, you will change the way you look at things. And one day, you will just say, whew, gone. And you feel so, gone from your heart, gone away. It may take time, but eventually you will get there. So be wise. Remember that this is all about Ajahn Brahm's famous simile of the truckload of dung, right? Sometimes people think that Ajahn Brahm's book, this simple story is not very interesting. These stories are great. They're so powerful, and they're so deep, and there's so much stuff in there. The idea of the truckload of dung is precisely this. This is dung, right? What you had here. This is serious dung. You feel betrayed. So use that wisely. Use that dung wisely. Dig it in and make yourself grow in understanding and wisdom. And then when you let go, it will actually make the path. It will, move you forward on the path. Next time you come here, or next time you go on another retreat, you will actually have much better meditation as a consequence. Okay. Dear Ajahn, if we make donations under our parents' name without them knowing it, will they still get the merits? Thank you. If they are alive, you should tell them. You should tell them you made a donation in their name, because they might feel happy, right? If they are dead, well then when you make the donation, you tell yourself in your mind, dear mother, dear father, I'm doing this for you. I'm doing this because I wish you well wherever you are, wherever life you're in now. I wish you well. I'm doing this in your name. And then if they are there, if they're still around, they might feel a sense of happiness. Wow, he or she is looking after me. What a wonderful thing that is. And then you are doing something positive for your parents. So that's the way I would do it. When we do the chanting in the monastery, I always tell people, if we're doing chanting for somebody, always let the person know that we're doing the chanting here. Because just that knowledge makes people feel good, right? When you know that somebody's caring for you, somebody's looking after you, somebody's doing something kind for you, that is enough often to make you feel better. That is, so part of that is just a placebo effect, right? Or the feeling of happiness that somebody cares. So if you ever want anybody chanted for, you can just send a quick email to the monastery or something, and we'll put them on the chanting list. And then but then tell them, right? Let them know that we're chanting for them, and they get some happiness out of that. But only if they are sick or something bad happening. Otherwise, we get too many people. Okay, dear Ajahn Brahmali, there are many cases of even senior monks being tempted by women and they disrobe. At what stage of practice would that not be possible to happen? Would it be jhana or after the third jhana? What about stream winning? Is it a bad karma for a person to cause another deteriorate from practice? Yes, it is not a good idea to cause somebody to deteriorate in the practice. It's not very, or deviate, sorry, to deviate, I think that, deviate. It is, if somebody is practicing well and they're doing well, it's good to support them, right? Support them to move on and to do better. One of the things the Buddha always says is that if you want to be a virtuous person, is to practice the virtue yourself, but also to encourage other people in being virtuous. So if you kind of, pull somebody out of saying, you shouldn't be a Buddhist anymore, or, you have been a monk long enough, so, come back to lay life, that is not a good thing, because they're doing well and they are prospering in the Dhamma. So that you should support that. It's just like you support everybody who's doing well and say good on you for doing what is right. So that's actually part of virtue, is to also encourage other people to do what is right. But you have to be wise when you encourage others, right? You can't just say, you must be better, or you can't. You have to be very, very skillful in encouraging other people. And I noticed that as a monk, because when I started off as a monk, my parents were terrified, were kind of horrified. What do you want to become a monk for? This is ridiculous. So I started off like that, but then gradually, I didn't say anything to them. I didn't try to teach them. I tried a little bit in the beginning, but I realized it was a waste of time. But after a while, so I just shut up, and I was just trying to be nice to them, to be kind. And after a while, gradually, they turned around, right? And now they read Buddhist books. Now when I go to Norway, because I teach in Norway sometimes, because there are some meditation groups and things in Norway. Sometimes they come along, right, and listen to what I have to say here. And they sort of feel very happy. And then when this parents are always about, they may not understand success so much in meditation practice, but when they see that you are kind of teaching many other people, they think, whoa, this is good, So they see you on YouTube and they see you giving talks, and I think that's okay. So this is the thing. So you have to be very subtle and very careful. But if you do it in the right way, and if you're wise about it, if you lead by example rather than by word, then gradually people tend to come around. And this is the power of this path. Does there ever come a point when you cannot be tempted by women and disrobe? Or nuns tempted by men, I suppose. So of course, it comes at a very late stage on the path. I think if you are a stream mentor, you are pretty safe. If you have a jhana attainment, well, at least for a long time you are safe, but then that can also go wrong, right? You have a jhana attainment, then you may not get back there because you're practicing wrongly or it doesn't work out or whatever, and then some kind of, the wrong woman or the right woman or whatever you want to call it, comes along, and then somehow you lose it because of that. And of course these things can happen. So one of the most important things for both the monastic life and also for lay life, to keep you practicing the path, is to understand the teachings of the Buddha in a broader sense. And this is what has been so powerful for me in my monastic life, to understand that this is what life is all about, right? If this is what life is all about, if this really is the answer to the meaning of life, then what else do I want to do? What else is there to do? Even if somebody comes around who might seem attractive, who might seem interesting at first, then you are able to kind of dismiss that because you see the bigger picture of things. You see something which is more important, and that is kind of what keeps you on track. And that's why I think it is important to have some understanding, a deeper understanding of the teachings of the Buddha, because it gives that big picture which keeps you on the path and keeps you going, keeps you investigating, keeps you encouraged to do something which sometimes seems difficult. So it all depends on so many things, whether people disrobe or not. And I think the problem is, and one of the reasons people often get very disappointed and disillusioned is because they often place a lot of confidence and faith in people who perhaps they shouldn't have placed so much confidence and faith in, right? Sometimes we idealize somebody, we think that this person has got their act together, we think that they are an arahant or a stream mentor or whatever, when maybe they're nothing, right? This often happens. Sometimes people come to me and say, "Oh, maybe you're probably doing really well, but you don't know where I'm at. You have no idea where I'm at. You have no idea what I'm doing. So don't place any. Be careful with where you place confidence and faith. Otherwise, you get very disillusioned at this robe." I must admit, if Ajahn Brahm disrobed, I would be extremely surprised because he has a great solidity about him. I've been around him for 20 years. I know what he's like. But be careful, and that's why confidence and faith in the end should not so much be placed in individuals, but in the teachings of Buddhism, because the teaching as a whole is very solid, but individuals can be very, very hard to actually know exactly where they're at. And then you don't get so disappointed, right? You don't get completely disillusioned when your favorite monk or your favorite nun disrobes. Oh no! And people get shattered, right? They get really, really shattered when somebody disrobes who they thought was enlightened or whatever. I know many people who get completely destroy their faith in Buddhism because of that. So be careful. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Dear Ajahn, what is Mara? I always thought it was a personification of the defilements of the mind. But if the Buddha could have promised Mara to enter Parinibbana, then surely Mara has to be external. Thank you. There's many ways of understanding Mara. I think the way Mara is kind of often talked about in the sutta, sometimes Mara seems to be a real kind of deity which actually is there, which actually exists in the universe. But in the vast majority of cases, Mara is the personification of the defilements. It's the tempter, right? The devil which says, you must do this. That's Mara. So that is the most common usage of Mara. So the Buddha, I heard one interpretation was very interesting about when the Buddha promised Mara to enter Parinibbana. And there's also other things that I think the Buddha said to Mara, I will not enter Parinibbana until I have established the 4 assemblies, right? Until I have established the Bhikkhu Sangha, the Bhikkhuni Sangha, the lay men and lay women communities. When they are on a firm and strong footing, then I will enter Parinibbana. And then Mara comes and says, well, now everything is going well, so maybe now is the time. But one of the things I think that was suggested by this person, he's quite a well-known scholar, he said that Mara could perhaps be understood as the pressures of society that exist, right? Society says, you must follow the norms of society, you have to go this way. Because society has often very strong pressures. We have to conform, right? We have to be like everybody else. If you stand out too much, it's very hard to live with other people because you're too different. And this is one of the things, and probably the Buddha too had pressures on him, right? You shouldn't ordain women, or you shouldn't teach certain things. You shouldn't teach non-self because that goes against the Brahmanical teachings, the Hindu teachings of the time. He also would have lots of pressures on him. And this is one way also of understanding Mara, these pressures of society. And this might be one way of understanding Mara in this particular context. That was a suggestion anyway, but I think Mara has many different meanings in the suttas, the most important ones being the defilements, personification of the defilements. Dear Ajahn, how is first, second, third, fourth jhana experience help to cut or lessen the 12 links of dependent origination? Okay. So, gives me hard questions. Okay. So the way. Okay, I gotta get this right. The way this works is that. I'm not sure where to start because it could be quite involved. But the idea the point, of course, of dependent origination is to end craving, right? And that's the kind of the crux of dependent arising here. So when you have dependent origination, you have the 12 links, and you have the idea that feeling leads to craving. Vedana pachaya tanha. Feeling is the condition for craving here. So you want to, you cannot stop feeling. We all have to feel. Even an arahant has to feel, right? Because we have a body, you have a mind, so feeling has to be there. But what you can stop is craving here. And craving stops, as I was saying before, because you understand that these things that you crave for actually are suffering here. They are actually a problem in the world. And when you see these things as suffering here, that is when you can let go of craving. Craving stops as soon as you see things as suffering here. So the way that the jhanas help you is that when you come out of a jhana, your mind is very powerful, very pure. And then when you think back on that process I was talking about before, you look at the body, you look at all the things in life. For the first time, because the mind is powerful, the mind is pure, you have the ability to see that these things actually are suffering for the first time. You see that they are impermanent, you see that they are problematic, you see that they are non-self. And because you are able to see those things, you can actually reject them. So this is what happens after jhana. But you need that power of the mind. You need the kind of the stillness. You need the perspective that jhana actually gives you. You have to step out of the world a little bit. Only when you step out of the world can you see the world for what it is. Only when you become a frog can you understand the water. Only when you step out of the sensory world. Jhana is a stepping out of the world. It's like you come above the world and you can look down and you can see all the whole sensory realm, right? That's what jhana is like. Like the simile of Ajahn Brahm again, the simile where he talks about when he went to in Central America, where you have these pyramids, the Mayan Indians had pyramids in Central America. And when you walk up those pyramids, you have this religious experience because for the first time you can see out of the jungle. You can see to the horizon, right? When you're in the jungle, this is like in the tropics. Jungle is very, very thick. You can't see very far, only a few meters ahead of you. For the first time in your life, you climb the pyramid and you say, wow, I can see something. And that is a metaphor for jhana. When you go into samadhi, you can understand the sensory world for the first time. You are above it. You're outside of it. And now you can see what's going on. Most of our lives, we're always immersed in the senses, right? All we know is hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, and bodily touch. That's all we ever know. And then suddenly you're outside. And once you have that perspective, at least you understand that part of the world. And then when you see that, and you see that actually it is problematic, it's suffering. It doesn't feel like suffering, right? When you go around in life, and sometimes you have fun, and sometimes you have a good time, it's very hard to see that some of these things are suffering. You go to a really nice restaurant, you have really nice food. Oh, it's, I know in Singapore we have heaps of nice restaurants with all kind of different foods. It's very hard when you're eating, enjoying a nice meal to think, this is suffering. It's very hard, right? But the only way you can do that is by pulling yourself completely out of that world, entering a state of samadhi, and then reflect back on the experience. And then you will be able to understand why that is suffering. It's not actually the tasting itself which is suffering, it's actually the craving that is involved which is the suffering. So then you can let go of the craving. Because even an arahant, even an arya is able to enjoy the tastes, but it's the craving that comes with it which is the problem. So you let go of the craving here. So this is how the jhanas kind of help you. And then, of course, ultimately, you also have to see the jhanas themselves, right, as problematic, as suffering and impermanent. And this, now we're talking about something so high up, it's incredibly hard for us to even imagine what's going on at this particular point because it's so far above our normal experience. It's hard enough to see a relationship or to see nice food or to see whatever it is as suffering. But this is getting really, really hard. Imagine that you're completely blissed out. You're completely peaceful. You're just the happiest person in the world. You have metta for everyone. Compassion, letting go, everything. And then you have to understand that that's suffering, right? That is hard. And the only way you can do that is to reflect back on the jhanas and see that they too are constructed. They are made up. And unless you get out of that as well, you will come back again and you will come into problems in the future. And then you let go of that, you let go of craving for that, and then that is how it lessens the 12 links of dependent origination, because craving comes down. When craving comes down, you don't have so much upadana. Upadana is the next link of dependent origination. It means like to take up or to cling or to attach. When you have less craving, you attach less. Craving leads to attachment, because when you crave, you want to control the world, right? You want to control the relationship. You want to control the house. You want to control the things around you, so you attach to things. You want to control the happiness through meditation, so you become a Buddhist. Buddhist, there's a certain amount of clinging there, right? You're a Buddhist. If somebody challenges you, no, I'm a Buddhist. It's okay. That's fine to have that kind of clinging as a Buddhist. You have to have that. But there's a certain amount of clinging there. And then when you reduce that clinging and that taking things up, you reduce bhava. Bhava is existence. You reduce your sense of identity to a certain extent. You don't exist so much anymore. You don't create so much karma. And then when you don't create so much karma, when you don't exist so much, then you are changing the types of rebirths that are possible in the future. And you can only get reborn in certain realms. So basically what we are doing on this path, one of the things we're doing, we're changing our personalities, we're changing our identities, we're becoming more beautiful. It's not a bad thing to become a different person. If you become more happy and you become a more beautiful person, it's actually quite nice, right? So this is a good thing. But this is what part of what it's about. It's about changing, changing our habits, changing our personalities, changing who we are. And it's not frightening, it's beautiful. It's a wonderful thing to do. So please keep doing that. Okay. Dear Ajahn, what is the difference between an arahant and an enlightened person? Are they having supernormal powers like Ananda entering a keyhole? Can they make themselves disappear? Well, an enlightened one, Ajahn Brahm, I know what he uses these terms quite kind of freely. So usually when Ajahn Brahm says enlightened one, he means anybody who is an Arya, any noble person. That's usually what Ajahn Brahm says. So maybe what you mean is like the difference between the Arahant and the stream enter. And the difference is just the degree to which you have purified yourself, right? The degree to which you are an Arahant is somebody who's completely pure, because they have eliminated all the defilements completely, all the craving. A stream mentor is somebody who understands the teaching by direct insight, but there's still a lingering defilements in the mind, so they have to purify themselves completely. And the supernormal powers, like entering the keyhole, these are optional things, right? You don't. It would be pretty impressive to see somebody enter a keyhole. There was a sutta about that. I think there's a monk who, somebody asks this monk about some supernormal powers, and he says, "Okay, I'll just wait here." And he goes into a room, and then he shoots a flame, I think, through the keyhole from inside the room. And the flame goes out, and it hits the grass, and the grass burns or something like that. It's quite remarkable. Anyway. So these things are optional, right? You don't have to kind of shoot flames through keyholes, but it's still quite, it's obviously quite cool. But again, these things are, these things are, sometimes we think that if I could see some of these things, I get so much faith and confidence. If I could see somebody fly through the air or something like that. Then after a while, you don't get confidence. You start to wonder, well, maybe it was a trick, right? I mean, some of these magicians, they can do all this kind of stuff, right? They can kind of fly through the air and walk on the water and all this kind of things. They can do that. So is it a trick? Is it real? Is it actually, what is actually going on? And this is one of the reasons why the Buddha laid down the rules about not really talking about psychic powers and these kind of things. And the Buddha says in one sutta, he says that I dislike these psychic powers. I dislike these kind of wonders and marvels and miracles. I dislike them because it is so easy for those people who don't have faith to say, it's just some kind of trick, just some kind of David Copperfield or whatever. So, and it's true. It's very easy to dismiss, and it's very easy to fake these kind of things. Okay, Ajahn, we are taught to stay with the breath to achieve jhana. In the Satipatthana Sutta and the teachings of the 7 factors of enlightenment, great emphasis is placed on the development of mindfulness and the contemplation of the Dhamma, the 5 aggregates, 12 nibbas, and the 4 noble truths. So when do we do these things in our practice? Thank you. Okay. Before I answer that, I will just say that if you want to leave or you had enough or you don't want to hang around anymore, please feel free to leave at any time because I'm going on for a long, long time now. So, just out of compassion for you. So, okay. So, so this is one of the things to understand about Satipatthana and the Satipatthana Sutta is that the main purpose of Satipatthana, the way it is taught by the Buddha, is to take you to Samadhi. That's one of the main reasons why it's there. And you can see that if you look at the structure of the Buddhist path, it's always structured in the same way. You have the 8 factors, right? It begins with right view. And remember that this sequence is not a random sequence. Not only is it not random, but it's a causal sequence. One thing leads to another. And the Buddha actually says that specifically in many places, that one thing leads to another. And always in that sequence, Satipatthana leads to Samadhi. Samma Sati is the cause for Samma Samadhi. If you look at the 5 faculties, the 5 faculties are a similar kind of thing, right? 5 things: Saddha, faith, Virya, Sati, Samadhi, and Panya. Faith or confidence, energy, mindfulness, Samadhi, and wisdom. And again, you can see mindfulness there, again, which again is a Satipatthana practice, comes before Samadhi, right? Before jhanas. And again, it's a gradual thing here. If you look at the 7 factors of enlightenment, the first one is Satipatthana, and then you have the other enlightenment factors, which all have to do with Samadhi, right? So always, this is absolutely throughout the suttas, the structure is the same. Satipatthana comes before jhana. So you practice Satipatthana. The purpose of Satipatthana practice is to attain the jhana. That's the main purpose of it, is to attain the jhanas, to attain Samadhi. That's why it's there. So when you look at the Satipatthana Suttas, it's true that it talks about things like also about the 4 noble truths and the 5 aggregates. But the most important part of the last aspect of Satipatthana is the contemplation of the 5 hindrances and the contemplation of the 7 bojjhangas. And the reason why that is the most important part is because this is the part which you see across all the different traditional Buddhism. It's always there, always part of the sutta. Some of these other things, like the 4 noble truths, for example, very interesting. It only exists in the Theravada tradition. If you look at any of the other places where these things are talked about, the 4 noble truths are not mentioned as part of Satipatthana practice. Only exist in the Theravada suttas. So the main focus is on the 5 hindrances and the 7 factors of enlightenment. And these are the things that we have to develop, right? These are the hindrances, are the things that block us from Samadhi. And that's why they're part of the Satipatthana practice right there. So if you look through the Satipatthanas, the first one is the body contemplation. That's mainly about understanding the body, to get rid of the body, so you can move towards Samadhi. Again, this is gradual. The second one is about feelings. And the most important feelings mentioned there are the feelings of that have to do with negative mind states. So understand those feelings with negative mind states, to overcome them, to move towards Samadhi. Chittanupassana, understanding of the mind, is understanding the defilements of the mind. The more you understand that, the more you can overcome those things, you can move towards Samadhi. And the last one is understanding the 5 hindrances. And one of the interesting and powerful things about understanding the hindrances is to understand the conditionality behind the hindrances. Satipatthana Sutta says that you understand the hindrance, you understand why it arises, you understand how it is abandoned, and you understand how it does not come to re-arise again in the future, right? So you have very powerful understanding of the causality of these hindrances. And by understanding that, by understanding this kind of causality, this is how you understand how to abandon these things. Why does anger arise? Anger arises because we attend to something in the wrong way. We attend to something in a way where we see the fault or we see the problem. If you attend to something with compassion, that anger will not arise. And this is what you understand with this kind of Satipatthana practice. So Satipatthana, its main purpose is to understand the problems that gives rise to Samadhi. There's also probably a small aspect of Satipatthana which is about after Samadhi practice. And the reason I say that is because in the Satipatthana Sutta they talk about contemplating some of the feelings that are based on Samadhi. So there's also a small aspect which comes after samadhi, but the main thrust of Satipatthana is how to understand the defilements of the mind and move towards samadhi. So, and this is, I think, it's very useful to know this, because it kind of divides insight into two categories. And there's a preliminary kind of insight, which is about defilements and understanding yourself and overcoming the problems of the mind. This is the first aspect of insight. And then when you have an experience of samadhi as a consequence of overcoming the defilements, then you can have the real insights, the insights that have to do with actually understanding impermanence and suffering and non-self, right? Of course, they go together. These things are not completely separate, but the real understandings happen after samadhi. So Satipatthana insight is kind of divided a little bit. Pre-samadhi insight and post-samadhi insight. And they have different functions. One function is to overcome the problems. Another function is to understand reality as it actually is. That's the neat kind of differentiation. In reality, it isn't quite that neat, but it's kind of a useful way of looking at things. So, I hope that answers your question. The Satipatthana Sutta is a major study, of course, in its own right. One of the biggest problems in the Buddhist world is that people very often, they read the Satipatthana Sutta in isolation. They take just the Satipatthana Sutta and they think that they know and understand what Satipatthana is about by just reading that one sutta. And this is a big problem, because you can't really understand something unless you take a very broad view of the suttas and you see the context, how it's used throughout. Then you can understand it properly. If you understand only one sutta, it's not enough. That's why I gave you this context before. The context is the context of the Noble Eightfold Path, the context of the Bojjhangas, the context of the five faculties, the context of many other suttas as well I could mention, but I'm not going to mention it because it's getting late. So anyway, let's do the last few questions. What are the insight knowledges? Are they part of the early Buddhist teachings, or are they a later addition? So the insight knowledges, these are the jnanas you will often hear about. Of course, there are insight knowledges in early Buddhism, because any kind of insight you have is an insight knowledge. But the specific insight knowledge that you often hear about on Vipassana courses, they are taken from the Visuddhimagga. The Visuddhimagga is kind of the manual used by many Vipassana schools, and that's where they get these kind of insight knowledges from. So the question then is, are they kind of compatible with the early suttas? Are they not? And it's very, very hard to say sometimes. Maybe they are, maybe not 100%. But to me, the most important thing is that the Buddha didn't actually teach them. He taught in a very simple way. As far as I'm concerned, you don't actually need those to be able to make, to go all the way to the end of the path. That's what's important to me. I get my inspiration from the Buddha, and I'm very happy to put aside those later books. I'm always concerned of being led astray myself by these later teachings. Maybe they are good sometimes, but sometimes they are too detailed, right? And because they're so detailed, you start seeing these things in your meditation. Even they're not there, you start seeing them. Well, yeah, I have this insight. And it's very easy to think that you have things that you haven't got. Lots of people think they have the jhanas, right? Because they are explained in the suttas. It says, okay, you have piti sukha, you have ekaggata, you have, all these things. Okay, I had those things. Okay, must be jhana, right? It's not quite as simple as that. Sometimes you have to be very discerning and very careful with what you actually have in your meditation practice. These things are very profound and deep things. You have to be very careful in making judgments about these things. So even just the suttas are hard enough, and it gets even more complicated when you get into details like the insight knowledges. Okay, dear Ajahn, as a beginner meditator with a busy lifestyle, can you recommend a daily practice, i.e., when should we practice, how should we practice, and so forth? Okay, so you should do anything which supports your ordinary daily life, right? So do things that support you in being a better person, being more kind, being more gentle, being more generous, being more compassionate, having more time and understanding for people. So whatever works and helps in that direction is a good practice to do in daily life. So if you wake up in the morning and you find that just sitting down peacefully for yourself, watching the breath for a while, is helpful to kind of go through the day and have more time for people, not get upset about things, then please do that. It can be very useful. If you want to do a bit of metta, I recommend people to do a bit of metta practice if you can. Often it's not easy, but find a nice recording of metta practice. Sometimes you find some people who are very skilled in giving a good guidance. And if you have a nice guidance, it's often like draws you in, right? And you start to feel metta because the guide kind of emanates those qualities. So find a nice recording of metta and play that to yourself and go along with it. And then when you feel a bit of metta inside of yourself, you go out into your daily life, you find that you are more peaceful and more kind in daily life. So this, I think, is the most important thing. Any meditation you do should be a support for your virtue and your kindness in daily life. That's what really matters. So find out what works. Don't sit too long. Don't force yourself. Don't use willpower. Sit however long you feel is good for you. 10 minutes is okay. 15 minutes, fine. Whatever works is okay. Half an hour, great. But don't force yourself, because then you will be grumpy afterwards and it will be even worse. So this is what matters. It's our virtue. The Buddha always teaches the idea of virtue. When you look at the Buddhist path, the practice of meditation is automatic. It's all happens by itself. So it is our purity, our hearts that matters. If your heart is pure, meditation happens. So how can you purify your heart? That is what it comes back to. Okay. Dear Ajahn, I am able to achieve moderate level of concentration. During this retreat, I have experienced the nimittas. Is it okay to discuss your experiences with the spiritual friends, or should I rather not talk about such attainments? It's probably better not to talk about them because very often it can lead to all kinds of problems if you talk about these things. Sometimes people may not believe you, or they might want to test you to make sure you have a real nimitta, or is it just a fake one, or what is going on? Are you the real deal? Or you can get kind of into, sometimes if you talk about it, sometimes afterwards you feel a bit sort of, oh, did I kind of brag about it? And then it feels bad, it doesn't feel good anymore. You lose the goodness of the experience. So I recommend you to keep these things to yourself. Don't talk about them too much. If you start talking about it, you may kind of sully them. You may make them, corrupt them a little bit, if you know what I mean, by talking about these things. So talking about them with Ajahn Brahm, talking about them with a teacher, whoever is your teacher, and then that is the best way. They will then encourage you and guide you in the right way. And just be kind to your friends, be good to your friends, and that's good enough. That's what I would recommend. But there is no absolute right answer to these things. Sometimes if somebody needs a bit of encouragement, it can be nice to tell them, oh yeah, I've done that too. Or if somebody's your friend and they have that experience, you can say, oh yeah, I've been there, isn't it wonderful? And then you can kind of rejoice in these things together. There isn't any absolute truth, but just generally speaking. Dear Ajahn Brahmali, since Ajahn Brahm isn't here tonight, could you tell us the top and real life challenges of being a monk? Okay, what's the real bad, ugly and smelly challenge of being a monk? We promise we won't tell Ajahn Brahm. Okay. What are the most difficult challenges of being a monk? Okay. I don't know. I think one of the most difficult things is probably to find a balance between. I guess it depends on where you are in your practice. If you are a young monk. I mean, early in the monastic life you have certain problems. Later on there are different problems. So it changes as time goes by. Early on, the problem is that often you don't know enough about the Buddha's teachings. It's easy to get tempted by lay life, very easy to disrobe when you're a young monk. I think those things tend to disappear as you get older and you've been on this path for a long time. But I don't know. I think the most important thing probably just if you keep your eye on the suttas, if you remember the Buddha's teachings, and you have an overview of what's going on, you know what's happening, you know what this life is about, then you can always overcome any kind of temporary problems you have, you know. There's always going to be problems. There's always going to be things happening here. There's always going to be people you don't agree with, or you probably find it difficult to be with, that sort of thing. Yeah. I must admit, but in other monasteries, it's a very good place to be, and it's very, very harmonious and very kind and very good. But of course, even with the best of people, sometimes there are little things that happen. That's just life. But you overcome those things, right? And you say, you believe in the Dhamma, you keep practicing the right thing, and actually it usually works out for the better. And you use it as dung for your mango tree, and then you're fine. So, but one of the things, of course, becoming a more senior monk is that you have to teach more, right? And I have to travel quite a bit actually these days. I have almost every month I travel overseas somewhere to some place to do teachings and things. And this is often quite challenging here, because sitting in your kuti is quite nice and you're quite chilled out, everything is very nice. And then you kind of get out into the world, right? You go to Singapore or you go to Jakarta or whatever. And gee, it's very different from being sitting in your kuti here. And so that is actually quite challenging, to be able to deal with the world outside in a skillful way, and not kind of being dragged away from the Dhamma. That's when you get dragged away, when you're around people who don't have the same outlook as you have, when you're around noise, when you're around sensory impingements all the time, which impinge on you all the time. That is the most difficult time usually. That's what I find anyway. When in my kuti is no problem. It's when I go out that the problems usually start to arise. So that's why you will find many monks don't really want to travel so much, and it can be very hard to get monks to come to Singapore sometimes. Oh yeah, maybe not. See what happens. Okay. Anyway, that's just a few rough ideas for you. Ajahn, if there is no will, no driver in the bus seat, what is the cause, or what does the unwholesome acts in life? Who breaks the precepts? It's your habits, right? Your conditions from the past. I was talking about this before. This is what basically does it. You are habitual. You are conditioned into who you are now. That is basically what breaks the precepts. So it just happens. Sometimes there is perhaps a little bit of will there, a little bit of you kind of involved, but basically it is the conditioning from the past. Okay, I'm going to go fast now. Thank you very much to Brother Vincent too, for his hard work in the kitchen alongside Michelle in creating a truly amazing meal for us. Much appreciated with metta. Okay, very good. How do we remain kind and gentle in an organization where people are aggressive sometimes and scheming? Yes, it is not easy. As I mentioned, I talked about this before, about how to deal with people, right? Remember that people are the result of the habits from the past. Remember that people don't want to be this way. Most people know. I think most people know in their heart that kindness is good, that kindness makes you happy. I think most people know that. And still they do bad things. Why? It's because they can't help themselves. Think about that. If people actually want to be kind, but they can't help themselves, again, you have to have compassion for them, right? It's against, they can't stop, basically, the bad habits from coming out. So just try to reflect on those things I mentioned before. How do we keep our precepts of no false speech? Which job requires whereby transparency is not allowed? Okay. Well, you have to... Sometimes you just have to find, you find ways of not being false speech. Perhaps you can avoid talking, avoid saying anything, or you do your best to find a way around these things. Sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes it is hard. Sometimes if a job is too demanding and asking too many unwholesome things for you, maybe you have to quit your job and find something else. If it really isn't unwholesome, remember that there is such a thing as wrong and right livelihood in Buddhism. And if it is wrong livelihood, then of course you should quit and you should do something else instead. So sometimes you just have to ask yourself. But very often there are solutions to these things, right? There are ways around it. There are ways of being able to not to lie, not to say the wrong thing, even in situations like that. So just try to find. Sometimes you just have to be creative, and you have to look at your life, and you have to kind of see what's possible, what can be done. So, yeah. Anyway, that's a very, very quick answer. How does karma get exhausted? You become enlightened, right? And then you pass away, and that's it. That's how karma gets exhausted here. Okay? It's exhausting the questions very fast, which is very useful. Dear Ajahn, bad and evil thoughts, do they count as bad karma? Example, if a person has unfaithful thoughts but never had extramarital affairs, or if a person plans a murder but never really kills. It's interesting, this idea of people planning to murder other people, because I remember there was an investigation. They had this a survey at one of the universities in the US, and the survey was, in the last 6 months or whatever, have you ever kind of fantasized about killing somebody? And the survey came out, and I think it was over 90% of the students had fantasized in the previous 6 months or previous year about killing someone else. It's very common, right? Sometimes we get really angry about somebody, and then we think, oh, I would really like to see this person dead or whatever. So it's very common. So you don't have to feel so incredibly bad if occasionally you get a passing thought that, oh, I really like this person dead. But it's not, remember, there's a massive difference between the thought and the action, right? The majority of us would never even contemplate actually doing it, even if the thought might occur to us in passing. We'd never even think about doing such a thing here. And I know some people who have fantasized, and one person told me had fantasized really strongly about killing someone else. I thought about all the ways he's going to do it and all the details and everything. Yeah. But then he used the technique which Ajahn Brahm sometimes teaches, the idea that you ask the question, so then what? Then what? Then what, right? And so you ask yourself, what happens then? So then you kill the person, and then what, right? What afterwards? How do you feel then? So you have the corpse there lying in front of you, you have killed them. What then? And that's when kind of life takes on a different meaning, because then you have to deal with the consequences of killing them, right? And when you start to think of the consequences, the person is actually dead, then you start to realize what a crazy thing it is to actually kill somebody. Because then you understand. So people usually stop at the murder, they fantasize up to the point of murder. They don't go beyond that, right? They don't think about the consequences. The consequences, that's where the problems start to arise. But the point is that the thinking of these things is not such a bad thing. The thinking is only a minor thing. The thinking is not such a big problem. The really bad thing is if you actually act these things out. So, of course, it's good to change the way you think. It's good to change the way we do things. But don't be too worried about that. If you're too worried about that, you will just start getting upset and anxious about your thoughts. But, of course, part of the life as a Buddhist is to learn how to change our perceptions, our way of thinking, and all these things gradually. And, of course, if you think differently, if you think more kindly and you have less desires, it's very easy to be kind, very easy to be moral. It's very easy to treat people in a good way. So it has tremendous advantages of being able to change the way you think and to think in a more wholesome way. The karma is not so strong, but it's still very useful. Okay, can you tell us something about this Sunday's Kathina? I think Ajahn Brahm will tell you what the Kathina is about on the day. He will kind of give you a rough idea. I don't think I want to get into that now. Please excuse me. It's getting a bit too long, I think. Yeah, but you see what happens. Lots of noise, lots of people, basically. But quite inspiring as well. I shouldn't be so negative about that. It's quite inspiring. People coming together, doing something kind. It's a good thing. So. Okay, this is a good way to end this thing here. Please convey many and heartfelt thanks to Michelle, the cook, and the assistant cooks who prepared and made our meals with loving care. That's what made the food delicious every day without fail. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. What a wonderful thing that is. To last question or non-question, I'm not sure. That's great. So. Okay, so very nice to see you all again. So how many, I'm probably going to see you here, so at least some of you are going to be here on Sunday, right? So yeah, okay, good. So anyway, let's just pay respect to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha and then call it a day. Patitano Bhagavato Sarvabhauma